Today's video is going to be a little bit different to what we're used to. I'm not going to go into polishing this to make it all the errors and things are taken out. I'm literally going to show you warts and all of how I think we're going to change the way in which we design and create websites using WordPress. Now, we know there's tools like Bolt and Lovable and things like that out there that will build the entire thing. But a lot of people on this channel are still WordPress users, and you still want that functionality that WordPress provides. But you may want to speed up your overall workflow, make things simpler, and harness the power of AI in various different ways. This is how I think our workflow is going to change. Still going to require people like us, but we are going to change how we approach building websites. So let's take a look at what I think is going to be a more typical approach moving forward. Let me quickly show you what I've done in my testing, and then we're going to see how we can approach this in a slightly different fashion. So I wanted to see if we could create a real estate website. So ignore design, more about functionality. So I wanted to see, could we create the data structure underneath a real estate website that includes custom post types, meta fields, taxonomies, sort of bi-directional relationships, then create templates, pulling all that information together, connecting up the bi-directional relationships and displaying that data without us actually creating everything from scratch. I also wanted to make sure that we could use a design system that I've created. I'm using Bricks Builder in this particular video, but you don't have to. You could do this in Elementor, and I'm sure other options will be available. But this is a demonstration of, I think, how we're going to approach things. So let me give you a quick overview of what's going on here. So I've basically going to create a custom post type for properties. As you can see, there's featured image, title, there's different categories. So we've got taxonomies in here, information about the property itself, and so on. Then we can actually come in and click on any of these, and we go into the detail page. So no different to what we used to see in an archive page and a single post template page. But all of this was done via AI. I didn't design anything here. And while it's not the nicest looking thing in the world, it is a starting point that we could easily change the way this looks, start updating using our sort of global design system, and be able to quickly take this data structure, tidy it up, and make something that actually is fully featured. So for example, if we take a look at the estate agent on the right hand side, all their details, their image, everything is in a bi-directional relationship connected to this property. So this one is Oliver Grant, for example. Let's go back out of here, choose a different property, try this one, and this time we've got Amelia Hart. So we've got a different person, different image, different contact details. All of this was done using AI, including the data, the images, and everything all pulled in from external sources. So we've got images being pulled in from Pexels. We've got data being sort of created on the fly for us. As you can see, I'm based in the UK. All of this data is UK based. Images obviously are not. We've also got images underneath then for interior. I haven't chosen any of these. I've literally just told NovaMira in this example connected to Codex to go and find images to support what we're doing here. Interior images for the gallery, exterior images for the featured image. And it's done all of that for us. Pull in all the data, create the data, and everything. Now we've seen the kind thing. Let's see how I think we will start to approach this in the future. Now we're going to be using NovaMira. I've got the Pro version here, which you can grab on a lifetime deal if you want to, or you can buy a single license. You can try a lot of this with the free version, but the Pro is trained on Bricks and Elementor, so you are going to get better results with the Pro version. I'm not affiliated to NovaMira or Dynamic OO in any way. They are just the company that have created this, and I'm testing this out, testing the Pro version to kind of show you how I think we will work. How does this differ from something like the MCP options that we're going to have inside WordPress itself? Well, basically, WordPress, when version 7 releases, it's not going to have an MCP built in. It is effectively just going to give you the tools to connect your AI of choice to any plugin that requires an API connection to that particular sort of service. So if you have a plugin that is a dedicated MCP, instead of having to put in the actual credentials for the API for Codex or Claude, that will be put in one place, and all those different tools will be able to access it. That's primarily where we are with WordPress 7 right at this point when it's released. There are other tools out there, and if you want to use them, you absolutely can do. And the process will probably be very, very similar because we're using the same AI tools in the back end, just using different MCP tools to connect. Like I say, this is trained on Bricks and also on Elementor, and there is training coming out in the next couple of days to help it work better and understand ACF even better. That's what we're going to use. Bricks is my tool of choice, but like I say, choose whatever you want. I've already created my connection. I'm using Codex, so my connection is all set up, ready to go. I've connected this, checked it, everything is working. If we jump into the plugin section, for example, you see inside here, all I've got is NovaMira and NovaMira Pro. I've got no templates, no real posts or anything included here. It's basically just a clean copy of WordPress with bricks installed, set up, and NovaMira connected. So first things first, we need to make sure we've got everything set up for the project we want to work on. So what we're going to need to do is make sure we've got Codex in this example, Claude AI, all those tools are very similar, all set up, making sure that the connection is in place. So let's test that connection out. Let's head to list all the MCP servers we've got connected. And as you can see, that shows me what I've got connected. This is the site that we have here. So we're going to tell it to use that from this point on. Okay, there we go. Tell it to use the MCP server for the remainder of this session. So now we know it's going to be using the right connection. So now we know we're connected up to the site itself. So let's do something really simple. Let's get it to actually tell us what plugin and what themes we've got installed. As you can see, it tells us exactly what it's doing, so we can see at any point what's going on. Now it's going to come up and ask us for permission to do something. In this case, it wants to use the ability NovaMira execute PHP. Now obviously, you need to make sure this is a development environment, and once you've sort of finished, you can disable the connection if you want to, and you can disable this inside NovaMira itself. But what we're going to say is we're going to say allow for this chat. We're going to confirm that and say allow. So I'm not too bothered, this is a demonstration, but you set up what you feel is the best for the process that you're working with. But as you can see, it tells us we've got NovaMira, what version and Pro installed, and also what themes to install. So we know the connection is working and everything is in place. So first thing we need to do is we want to build out the data structure. That's the kind of starting point before we worry about templates and design and those kinds of things. So we need to have some kind of plugin to do this. You could use native functionality inside WordPress to create these, but I want more flexibility where I can visually change things, update and manage things. So I'm going to use advanced custom fields. We're going to use the free version to start off with, but you could obviously install Pro if you have licenses. Just going to tell you to install advanced custom fields. There you go. So it's going to download that from WordPress.org and then it's going to activate it ready to use. Now, obviously, these are all things you could easily do yourself and you could set your environment up. And obviously, you probably would do that unless you are working remotely and you want to handle a lot of things inside the AI so you can then see exactly what you've done right the way through the entire process. You could easily do that should you want to. So now let's get to list out the relevant plugins, specifying we want the active ones to make sure that it is activated. Here we go. So we've now got the latest version of ACF installed. We're in a position now where we're ready to start building up the data structure. So I need to tell it what I want it to do. So let's do just that. Let's put a prompt in to say specifically what we want. So my prompt is basically saying create a couple of custom post types, create a taxonomy, create a bi-directional relationship between the agents and the properties, and add in some additional fields. Now, I'm being quite vague in what I want, so obviously this is going to have a little bit of its own kind of carte blanche when it comes to what it adds in there, but I'm more important to see, does it take on board everything that I specifically ask it? So I need you to specifically use ACF to create these. I don't want it to use built-in functionality, which is what I found in the past it does tend to do. That might be down to the AI tool, Codex or Claude and so on, or it could be something else. But let's see what happens now. This is going to take a little while because there's a lot of things here it has to do. It has to create custom post types, create bi-directional relationships, add in the relevant fields and all those kinds of things. Once we've completed that, we're then going to ask it to sort of fill out any data that we want to put in there. So it'll create fictitious data, grab those images and so on. So we'll use it to populate the actual content we want as kind of starting point. So let's see how long this takes and let it go and do what we want it to do. Now, as you can see, it says, I'll add this as persistent WordPress native code in the NovaMira sandbox. Register the two CPTs and taxonomy, then define ACF field groups and sync the property agent relationship in both directions. Now, sometimes what happens here is it kind of defaults to creating a custom function to do things, which is not really what we want. So there is one thing we can do. Now, before we kind of let this finish, I'm going to jump over back into our WordPress site. I'm going to show you something you have inside NovaMira Pro that you don't have in the free version that can help us with these kinds of things. So if you come into NovaMira and you come in, you see you've got memory and instructions. If we open this, you can see we can create custom instructions, and we can also set whether we want the memory to be enabled or disabled. And we're going to leave this, you see no memories yet, add one to start building persistent context for agents. So you can customize this to get a lot more control over what you want to do. So you see we've got things like user, feedback, project, reference, and so on. So if you've got specific things you want to reference, you can use memories to do that. If you've got specific instructions you wanted to take into consideration, you can do that. So for example, we may say we always wanted to use native ACF functionality over WordPress functionality for anything to do with custom post types and so on. So let's create an instruction here to tell it to do just that. So there's our instruction. If ACF or ACF Pro is installed, always use the native ACF functionality to create custom post types, taxonomies, relationships, etc. Do not use native WordPress functionality and do not create custom code to handle these functions. Just use ACF or ACF Pro. So now we can say save that instruction, and that custom instruction has now been applied to this particular project. Now, obviously, this is project specific. We don't have this for all projects. You may want to create a skill, for example, if you want this to be kind of default applied on every single project. But knowing you have this with NovaMira Pro does make it a little bit easier to have these custom instructions as part of the project you're working on. Because each project may have generic things it wants, but it's also going to have very specific things that it needs. So you do have these functions, and the same thing then goes for your memories. Now, if you're enjoying this video and getting value from it, why not go down there and hit that subscribe button to be notified when new content like this is added? And while you're at it, why not hit the thumbs up button to tell YouTube you enjoy it? If for any reason you're not getting value or enjoying this, you can hit the thumbs down button twice, as that works pretty well too. Anyway, let's crack on with the rest of this video. Okay, so after 1 minute of 44, you can see it's created persistent WordPress context using ACF, and you can see it's created a sandbox, which is not really what we want. So if we go back and we come into ACF and post types, there are no post types, no field groups, no taxonomies. But if we come over into NovaMira and we come into Sandbox, inside there, you'll see we've got this custom PHP. It's sandboxed, but you'll see we do have properties and agents, but it's not what we want. So we're going to need to tell NovaMira and tell Codex that's not what we want. So let's go back and we'll update what it says here. So I've basically told it now, look, you've done wrong. You've sandboxed a custom function. I want them in ACF. You're going to need to move things over. So let's do that. And as with most things when it comes to AI with ChatGPT and Claude and so on, it always tells you, you're right, I did so and so wrong. That's not what you asked for. Absolutely, it's not what I asked for, but you didn't listen. So now, hopefully, this will convert that over and we'll have access to these inside ACF. Hopefully, also, the custom action or the custom sort of setup we just created will tell it from this point on to always use ACF. It's still not perfect. You still need to understand what you're doing. I think this is the overall thing that's often overlooked when we see the videos online about how easy it is to create websites and so on. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know when something is being done incorrectly. You'll see the end result, and the end result might look correct, but how it's done it may not be, and it may lead further down the line that it means there's problems making changes because it's done it in a less than optimal way. So you do need to understand what's going on and keep an eye on what it's doing and check these kind of key important things as you do them. So as you can see, it's going through and it's telling us the direction is clear. I'm going to persist these as ACF managed objects in the database, then disable, delete the custom registration file so it no longer owns the structure. So this then should give us all these controls inside ACF and have everything mapped out for us with all the same functionality that we had by creating them natively. Now, one of the things that I think is important to consider here when you see a lot of this sort of, look, AI is going to take our jobs and so on, is the amount of time you actually take monitoring, correcting, and dealing with checking everything that the AI is doing. No matter how good they are, they're still not as good as someone that knows what the heck they're doing. So you do have to question, would I be quicker to do some of these things myself as opposed to getting the AI to do it? That's going to come down to you understanding what needs to be done and how good or bad the AI actually is at doing what it needs to do. Now, you can cater for a lot of these different things by using skills and giving it very specific instructions and setting up global kind of parameters for how a project works. But I think with all AI, you are still going to get some kind of overriding hallucination, taking control of what you don't want it to do and doing it in its own way. And then you've got to kind of go back, give it a slap on the wrist and tell it to do it the right way. At which point, sometimes it'll do it. Sometimes it'll just carry on hallucinating. So I think we are still very early in this process, and I think we still have a long way to go before it does replace even low-level sort of designers and engineers or coders and creators and those kinds of things. So there we go. After just over 3 minutes, it tells us now it's pushed this over to ACF. So now let's go back into our site and see if it's done what we asked it to do. So if we come into our post types, there's our estate agents, there's our properties. Come to our field groups, estate agent details, property details. Come into taxonomies, and we have property types, and we also have the details over here as well. If we take a look inside, everything is obviously empty. So now we can do something that really does take an awful lot of time, and using AI to even just handle something like this can save an awful lot of time, especially when you're setting up a demonstration site, or you're just prototyping, or you just need some data installed into a project you're working on. This just makes life so much quicker and easier. So let's ask it to do one important thing. Let's ask it to go and pre-fill some data out. Okay, so let's start by adding some UK-specific property types to the property type taxonomy. Let's go and do that. That shouldn't take too long. Again, these are just little things that mean that you can speed up that process. So I'll add practical UK-focused starter set to the ACF managed property type taxonomy, keeping the terms hierarchical where it helps browsing later. So let's let it do that, see how long it takes to do it. There we go, 29 seconds, and we now have 24 UK-specific terms to the property type taxonomy. Also add useful child terms like detached house, semi-detached house, and so on. So let's go and take a look. Come into our site, come over to our properties and our property types. And there you go, there's all of that set up. So there's the first part. Next, let's put some properties in. Okay, so I've asked it to add in 10 properties with full data to use exterior images pulled from Pexels, and also create 3 estate agents, pull down headshots, give them all their details, and connect both the property and the agents together so everything is all connected up the way we want. Now, this probably will take a little bit of time because it needs to go and download files and so on, insert those into the media library. So let's just hit send on here and let's see what happens and how long it actually takes. Now, I'm expecting this probably will take a good few minutes. It's not something that's going to be quick because it does have to kind of set up those connections to the images, download the relevant images, have to search in for them and those kinds of things, as well as connecting up all the data. But as you can see, it's searching the web for pexels.com photo, detached house, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of going through and searching for the relevant kind of keywords based upon the information. It'll do the same thing then for the headshot. As you can see, this is updating relatively in real time. Professional headshot, woman, business, portrait, Pexels. So it's going through and it's searching based upon the content it's putting in as sample data. This is really quite cool, and it does save an awful lot of time setting up that sort of sample starting data. And obviously, if you were using a live website and you were transitioning the data over, you could test this out by trying to pull in the relevant data from the live data on the website and pulling that over. I've tried things like that when I used Bolt before, and it pulled the relevant data in really, really quickly. And it was a really quick way of doing and testing things out and having the actual live data as opposed to sample data. So it's something worth trying out. And if I had a good example, I'd be trying that out right now as well. Okay, so just under 6 minutes. There was a little bit of a problem with the timeout, so maybe it would be quicker than normal. And maybe I was pushing a little bit too much by asking it to do all these things at the same time. But now it tells us 10 properties, 3 estate agents. They've been connected up. We've got the images and so on. So let's jump into WordPress and see if that's all in place. So coming to the media library, you can see we've got a bunch of images inside here, including our different estate agents. If we come into our estate agents section, there's our different estate agents, and jump in and take a look. You can see there's the person, there's their details, and we've got some meta boxes underneath. There we go. We've got some additional details. And as you can see, there's our bi-directional relationship showing us what they're connected up to. Come out of this, go over into our properties. There's all our properties. Let's open one of these up. We can see there's our property details. There's our estate agent. There's the information on the side. Okay, so now our data structure is in place. So we've got the basics here. But now we need to go and start work on the design side of things. So there's a couple of things you can do here. If we come into a page, for example, we'll add a new page. Doesn't really matter what it is. Just going to edit this with bricks so we can kind of open bricks up and have a little look. So let's edit this with bricks. So if we come over into our styles, you'll see inside here we've got no theme style. So you can see there's nothing there. We've got no classes, no variables, the basic colors, which we're going to get rid of. So we're going to just delete those and confirm. Typography is empty, spacing is empty, framework is empty, and settings is basically just the default settings inside here. So save that so we know there's nothing going on. Now, how do we get this to do what we wanted to do? How do we get consistency and so on with variables and stuff? Well, there's a couple of ways you could approach this. If you're working for a client, chances are they're going to have some kind of sort of assets. It could just be like logo, which has colors in it. They could be very specific about the typography they want to use, spacing and so on. So you can have a wide range of differing sort of levels of complexity when it comes to brand assets and so on. Let's just say you've got something there. If you want to start from scratch, and obviously you could just basically start from scratch completely, create your own variables, classes, and so on, using the native functions in Bricks. But let's just say you've got a design system supplied to you by a client in some format. So let's say you've got a design system from a client and it's kind of in a format that you want, or you just need to sort of grab the data from there. I've got one here that I created, and you could easily just reference a website or reference any kind of variables and things they may have supplied already, and you could create a design system like this for any project. That's literally what I've done here. I use Claude AI to be able to create this, and it's pulled in all the relevant values for my fluid typography and so on. So everything that I want for this particular project is inside here, but not in a format that I want to use. So what we're going to do, in this example, I'm going to use normal ChatGPT. I'm going to add that file in. That's now uploaded, and I'm going to tell it to grab all the values and things from there and create a simple, copyable set of values. So let's just get that from here. Let it go through and check all that out and grab all those values. There we go. After less than a minute, we now have the color variables, typography, heading defaults, spacing variables, layout values, and so on. So once that's finished, I can grab what's relevant. So for example, these ones here might not be relevant, but we'll grab everything and see what happens. So copy that source, head back over into Codex, and just tell it what we're going to do. There we go. Paste all those values in, hit enter or return, and let's see what happens. Now, obviously, this is just dumping all that data in. You probably want to spend a bit of time refining it to make sure it is exactly what you want and need based upon what's being supplied to you or what you're creating. But this is just a kind of demonstration of, I think, how the process is going to work. And we can see what happens. Like I say, this is a kind of warts and all, see what happens, test things out, and see where we get to. Okay, so after running out of tokens with Codex for the first time ever, after a pretty heavy session yesterday and today, I had some lunch and I've come back to carry on. So we are at the point now where hopefully we've pulled in the design system. So let's jump into Bricks and see what's been pulled in when it comes to variables and things, and see if it's done what we've asked it to do before we move on and start trying to create some design ideas. So we come back into Bricks, open up our style section, look at our theme styles. You can see that UK real estate design system. So it's brought it in and named it. Conditions is set for the entire website. There's some style sheet information inside here. I'm not sure why a lot of that's been brought in, but there you go. Go to general, things have been set up, again, using our variables, so that's good. If we come into our elements, for example, and come into our container, if we take a look, there's our max width and so on. So it's pulling in our variables. Now, you might need to do a little remedial work here, and obviously you can create your own starter sort of variable sets, or you could use someone like Core Framework and import in that way. There's lots of ways in which you could approach this, but I'm just kind of going for the, let's assume we have nothing, so we're starting from scratch. This is how you could approach it. So now we can start asking Codex to create some templates. So let's come back out of Bricks, go into the Bricks section and into templates, just to confirm there's nothing here. So let's tackle the archive first of all, because this is probably the more complex one. Come back into Codex, and what we're going to do is we're going to basically tell it what we want it to do. Okay, so we're just going to get it to create the template for us for properties and assign the relevant conditions to display it. So let's get it to do that. Now, obviously, you can go and you can dump a ton of stuff inside here to tell it exactly what you want to do. And depending upon how complex that is, you may get positive, negative, or mixed results. I tested it yesterday, and the results were okay. They weren't too bad at all. But I think sometimes it's better to take things in smaller pieces, because then if something goes wrong or something doesn't work the way you expect, it's easier to fault find taking those small pieces. But by all means, get stuck in and try and see what you think works best for any project you're working on. So you go, the template is created and conditioned. I'm verifying it's still blank and the condition is stored exactly blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there we go. Now, property archive, template ID number 84, and it's creative the property type of property. Verified is still blank. Header, content, and footer areas all have no bricks elements yet. Now, we haven't created any header and footer templates. You would probably create those as part of the overall process, but they're very simple in kind of relation to what we're trying to do here. So let's go over back into bricks, refresh our templates. There's our property archive. Let's open this with bricks and take a quick look. So it is empty. We can confirm that. Let's come into our manage, come into our template settings, conditions, set to archive, populate. So we've got nothing set inside here yet. Obviously, we can set what we want, but we're going to leave all of this blank. We're just going to let the AI take control of all this. So now that we've created the template, we want to build it out. Before we do, though, I want to install a new skill in Codex. Now, this, I believe, is already available in Claude Code, so you may only have to sort of invoke it. I don't have that set up in Codex. So I'm simply going to come over, we're going to copy the URL to this, head back over into Codex, and tell it to install the skill. That'll take a few moments now to go and install it, then we can make sure that we use that, and this will hopefully help us get a nicer design as we move forward. Again, like I keep saying, I wouldn't use this design, whatever we kind of come up with, as the end result. We're focusing more today on data structure, building out templates and so on, and we'll refine the design at our own leisure. Another skill to take a look at is the taste skill, which is basically the anti-slop front-end agent or framework for AI agents. So again, we're going to do the same thing here. These should hopefully help us get nicer designs without all the sort of the typical AI slop that we kind of used to seeing. And we're going to need to restart Codex afterwards to carry on working. So we'll let this install, then I'll restart Codex and we'll carry on. So I'm just going to tell you to use those design skills as we go through the design part. Okay, so let's do it. So we're going to keep this relatively simple. We're going to take to create a card. We're going to use the native query loop. We're not going to use the post element because that's annoying. And also we have the variables we induce. So let's see what this does and see if this comes back with something good. I'm also going to add in there some additional details about the aspect ratio and so on I want to use for the images. So let's tell it to go and do that. Say yes, we want to allow that. We'll say allow for this chat because we've restarted. We have to confirm that we're happy with letting NovaMira do various different things. Obviously, this is all one session. You wouldn't have to worry about that. But because we've installed those skills, had to restart, had to confirm again. Okay, and there we go. We now have this all set up. So let's see what this looks like and if it's looking remotely nice or an absolute mess. Okay, so this is where we are. And for some reason, we've got broken images and a kind of strange overall effect going on. So we do have our archive page, but things are not working correctly. So let's just address that. First of all, let's just take a quick screenshot of this, copy it, and take that back into Codex. Okay, so I said the images are missing, remove the hover effect and adjust the content hierarchy. So again, let's kick this off. Now my guess is where it's created this, it might not have used the various different elements. This is one thing, again, that seems to happen in my testing. You have to force it to use elements as opposed to just put in shortcodes and things in for the various different dynamic data. Well, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I just don't think it's the right way of going about creating the various different layouts. So once this is finished, we'll see if it's corrected the problems, then we'll jump back into bricks and have a little look. Again, this goes back to my same point that I've made over and over and over again in this video, is that I don't think we are in a position right now that this is something you can use to replace real human people with an eye for design, with understanding how these things are built, looking for problems, fixing those problems, without having to continually go back and forth to the AI tool, telling it what to do. Now, what I'm going to do while I'm waiting for this is I'm going to jump back over into NovaMira, come back into our memories, and I'm going to add a new custom instruction inside here. So you say ensure that bricks elements are used in favor of using shortcodes when creating pages or layouts. Save my instructions, and hopefully that will stop it from doing the thing I just said. Okay, so update the property archive card. Let's go and take a look at it. Now we're getting a little closer. We do have everything we kind of need here. So let's jump into bricks and see how this is being created. So let's edit it with bricks and let's have a look. So let's select our image. It is actually using the image tags. That's fine. That's good. Give it a style. If we take a quick look, layout. Okay. Things are looking okay in there. Come to CSS. You can see it is putting the classes inside here, which is kind of strange. So I'll leave that as it is for now. I would generally prefer to have these as just generic classes set up inside Bricks itself, but they can still be targeted, so they can still be used. Come back out, let's have a little look. Your basic text for your taxonomy. There we go, your post type property type, your heading, basic text for the typo, for the pricing and so on. It is putting in pounds, so that's pretty good. So it's not the nicest looking layout in the world. It's functional. What I would do is come in and customize this to make sure that it actually displays the text correctly. But it is using various sort of icons, not necessarily ones I would say make a lot of sense. But we'll say this has got us to the starting point. We'll just stick with this for now. Let's go back. Now let's get to create the single post template. Okay, so we've got more complicated with this, telling it we want to create the template, pull in the relevant conditions, add the content in, the design structure, use the relationship that we've set up between the estate agent and the property, etc., etc. So this probably will take considerably longer, but let's let this go and see what it does, and if it comes back with any issues or errors, and see if it actually connects everything up and does what we want. I'll also add in another thing while this is working. So the next thing I want to do, I then want to link up the properties on the property archive and also expand the link out to make the entire card clickable just using CSS. So we'll just hit enter on there. That will then come in after we finish this thing. We don't want to hit steer because this is going to add extra things in. So we're going to let this carry on, do the first thing I've asked it, check that out, and then hopefully it will also go and create the card design, make it fully clickable, etc., etc. So let's just see how this actually fares. Okay, so there's the first part done. Let's let it go and create the actual link and adjust the cards and so on. There we go. Let's see how that gets on there as well. And then we should be close to finish for what I want to cover in this video. Okay, so that's done what I've asked it to do. Let's check to make sure that it all works properly. Here's our archive page. And we can see the entire card is clickable. So let's click and take a look. So that now takes us through to our property. Pulls our details in. There's our estate agent, their name, address. There's an email. We can click on that. That's a mail to link. I would probably set that up as a form if I had a form installed in here, but you get the idea. Let's try a different one. Let's try this one, this Brighton Seafront. Again, you can see we've got a different person. Now, again, going back to the same problem, the design is pretty bloody ugly. There's no getting away from it, but the functions are already there. Now we can refine this, adjust what we need to, make sure everything is in place. And overall, this has probably taken about 45 minutes. The only thing that I find really frustrating with all of this is just how long you have to wait for the AI to do anything, which again goes back to my point. Is it actually quicker to use AI, or is it quicker to do certain parts using AI and just focus on the other parts doing it yourself? I think you probably have to refine your workflow to get what you're looking for. But there's still plenty of things you could do on here, and there's still plenty of things I've done when I was testing things out. So don't come back in the comment section and say, oh, Paul, there's only so much you've done here. There's still tons left to do. Absolutely there is. But I'm not here to show you how to build an entire website. I'm showing you how you can use this to build data structures, to build templates, get the key fundamental elements in there, using your design system, potentially in your global variables and potentially classes and things along those lines, and then you can refine it. For example, if we come back into the property archive, everything is using native Bricks elements. So everything is fully editable. I can now start assigning what I want and create classes on here. I can get it to create BEM name classes and so on. So I can now approach this in the way that I normally would without me having to go through the time and effort of creating the ACF data structure, creating those connections, those bi-directional relationships. All that is set up. You don't have to mess about with things like the relationship, setting all that up. It's all done for you. If we come into, for example, the single post template, now I can come in and I can start to customize it. It's set as H1. I can adjust my styling inside here. So I go to typography. There's my text title. Well, I don't want to use that. Let's expand that out. Let's say I want to change the color. I want to change the size. I can do all those things very, very quickly. I can easily come into my global styles if I want to, come in here and change anything I want. So if I come into my variables, come into my typography, for example, there's my text. So now I can create any kind of additional classes that I want, variables that I want, and apply those as I see fit. That leads me on to what don't I like about this? What do I find annoying or frustrating other than the waiting around and so on? Well, there's a couple of things that are completely obvious. And if you watch the entire video, you'll see them stand out like a sore thumb. Like, for example, you need to be very, very explicit in the instructions that you give. And even when you are explicit, it still doesn't always adhere to what you say. Again, this could be model specific. It could be a million different things. Chances are it's the LLM, like Codex, like Claude, whatever you're using, not taking on board what you say. The instructions you can apply in NovaMira Pro are useful, and hopefully they overcome certain things, but you do have to go through the process to realize where the problems lie and then try to retrospectively put things in place to avoid them in the future. The other thing is it will often create its own CSS and apply that in the CSS block in any of the elements if it actually uses elements that you want. Again, you can try to compensate for this in the instructions, but it is a little bit annoying that you have to then inform it to move things over from there. And sometimes it'll have a kind of mixed approach. It'll put various different variables into the relevant places for colors, typography, and things like that. But then for other things, it'll just add it into the CSS block. So again, a little bit frustrating. You can compensate, and that's kind of overarching thing here. You can potentially compensate for these things. You do also need to understand best practices and what is the right way of doing things, not necessarily the way that the AI does those things. Again, going back to the CSS being inserted. Once you know that, you can correct it. And as long as you don't kind of rely on it to do everything for you without checking and without potentially going back and fixing things, you could end up with an awful lot of remedial work if you don't know what you're doing or just not following best practices. It could just be a problem. And finally, it can say things have been done when they haven't. In other words, it hallucinates. So you see something that's a problem, you tell it to fix it, it says it's fixed it, but it hasn't. Again, this is one of those things that's sort of across the board when it comes to AI at this point in time. So again, a little frustrating. Once you know to see it, you can kind of work around it. But I still don't think this is something that's going to replace any remotely competent designer stroke developer at this point in time. There's still too many moving parts. There's still too many potential issues that you need to know about. Once they start to come together in a smoother workflow, or you modify your workflow to be a little bit smoother on how you do these things, it probably will get easier, but we need to get past those problems. And we don't know, because let's be brutally honest about it, the LLMs, the AI is not progressing at the same rate. We are kind of slowing down considerably what's being actually released and the ways in which it handles things. So this is always going to be a potential for problems there in the future. But as always, let me know your thoughts. Is this a process you are working on yourself? Is this something that's opened your eyes into the ways you want to work, or does this just put you off using AI right now completely? I'd love to know. Drop a comment down below and let me know your feedback. As always, all the applicable links for everything I've talked about in this video and everything I've covered are in the description down below. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.